total number of people who died in Ukraine was greater than the total number of Jewish victims in Europe.
My great-grandfather, he was a spy.
Oh, wow. My grandmother, she had to fake her paperwork.
My family, they become slaves.
Hello. We would like to welcome you to the next episode of our podcast, You
And I, Ukrainian New Identity.
With this podcast, we will help you
And us.
to reinvent Ukrainian history, culture and tradition.
And to see the history through the eyes of ordinary Ukrainians.
We will also highlight differences and similarities between Ukrainian and British cultures.
My name is Mariia Kushch. I'm Ukrainian refugee from Sumy.
My name is Zhenya. I'm from Ukraine and I have been living here for more than 20 years. How was your May?
Yeah, it's good. Finally, almost summer. That's my favorite season, probably. I really like to swim in the river and the sunshine. Here it's not like in Ukraine, it's not that hot, but it's wonderful. And what about you?
Well, I always I enjoy May very much here, and it does feel like summer. But I always feel nostalgia about the time in Ukraine when I was a child. And the beginning of May, we had quite a few holidays. So there was the 1st of May, then the 9th of May, and then finally it was all put together to make a long chunk of days off. And we went to plant potatoes. So I always thought of those days as potato planting days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but actually I think a very important day for me was the 9th of May, which is Victory Day, simply because my grandmother Zoya, she was in the Soviet army during the Second World War. And she serviced military planes, and for her, of course, that was a very significant day, and we always, spent it with her, gave her flowers, and she told me a lot of stories about war, and quite a lot of them really sad. And she taught me never leave anything on the plate, because, in the times of war, obviously they experience hunger. So I always teach my children and say, just take smaller amount of food, but don't leave anything on the plate, don't leave a piece of bread. There's things which now probably many people think are silly because we can just throw away food. There is lots of food in the fridge and in shops.
Yeah.
But for me, this connection with my grandmother, connection with history of the family and the history of the country and the world, really.
Yeah, and now in Ukraine we have this tradition, not on the May of 9, but on the 8th of May, like in all Europe. We celebrate the Victory Day, and I would love to hear more about it from our voiceover.
Yeah.
For decades, the 9th of May was one of the most important public holidays in Ukraine. Known as Victory Day, it commemorated the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945 and honoured the millions who fought and died in the Second World War. Although Germany signed its surrender late on the 8th of May, it was already after midnight in Moscow. That is why the Soviet Union, and later Ukraine, marked the victory on the 9th of May. The modern tradition of large-scale celebrations began in 1965, when Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev restored Victory Day as an official public holiday. In Ukraine, the day was marked by military parades, concerts, school ceremonies, and solemn visits to war memorials. In Kyiv, veterans marched along Khreshchatyk, children presented them with flowers, and thousands gathered at the tomb of the unknown soldier. For many Ukrainian families, this was deeply personal. Nearly 7 million Ukrainians served in the Red Army, and Ukraine suffered some of the highest losses of the war.
Between 8 and 10 million people from Ukraine, soldiers and civilians, lost their lives. After 2014, Ukraine began to rethink how this history should be commemorated. The focus shifted away from Soviet symbolism and towards remembrance, mourning, and a broader European approach. In 2015, Ukraine introduced the 8th of May as the Day of Remembrance and Reconciliation. In 2023, it became the official Day of Remembrance and Victory over Nazism in the Second World War. Today, commemorations are quieter. Instead of military parades, people lay flowers, observe moments of silence, and reflect on the human cost of war. This shift has helped Ukraine distance itself from Russian propaganda and give greater prominence to more recent chapters of Ukrainian history. At the same time, national memory is still finding its balance. State policy does not always reflect the emotional connection many Ukrainians feel to the 9th of May and to the sacrifice of their grandparents and great-grandparents. History shows that societies eventually find a way to preserve what truly matters to them. And in Ukraine, that means honouring new heroes without diminishing the generation that helped defeat Nazism. Because the contribution of Ukrainians was immense. Recognising that contribution in full is not about preserving Soviet narratives. It is about reclaiming Ukraine's rightful place in history and refusing to hand that memory over to those who would claim the victory as theirs alone.
Interesting. So, what was your memories like? Do you have any particular tradition except walking to your grandmother and listen to the stories about the Second World War? Like, for example, when I was at school, we had this thing that we have parade in our small town with kids who were changing to the military
Outfits,
uniforms,
uniform.
with the flowers. We bring flowers to the
veterans
of the war. And I remember I was probably around 8 or 9 years old. We stand like a long corridor with the flowers for them, so they walk. And I always remember this feeling when these old people cry when we just try to, give them this honor that we are really appreciate for their life choice. And we also went to the special place, which is, it's not graveyard, it's like a special just for the military from our town.
It's a military graveyard.
Yeah, and we had
cemetery.
Cemetery, and we had memorial of unknown soldier, and we bring the flowers, and there is always the fire which never turn off, and it always gives me this weird and such a strong feeling of sadness, deep sadness, and I always cry. Even though I didn't know any stories when I was a kid about the war. I just heard that this is like a really big trauma. I saw a few movies about that, but it gives me such a weird thing that I understand that in my blood, it's kind of like a trauma. I feel it, even when I was a kid, but yeah.
I think we are all affected with this basically communal trauma, because most of Ukraine, maybe all of Ukraine to be honest, I'm not quite sure, has been occupied, and I think we need to find out what happened during the Second World War with Ukraine, because I know for sure Kiev was occupied and people in Kiev had really tough time. Alexandria, which my charity is supporting, was occupied.
Sumy too.
Yes, Sumy. Zaporizhia was occupied because my father's family is from Zaporizhia, and my great-grandmother told my father stories about occupation times. Unfortunately, my great-great-grandfather was killed in the first sort of days of war when a bomb was dropped. He was going to his allotment, and the bomb was dropped and he was killed. So, quite a lot of sadness related to that war, and I think it's important for us to know the history of this period for Ukraine. Let's listen to this.
When the world remembers the Second World War, Ukraine is rarely at the centre of the story. And yet few countries suffered more. Between 8 and 10 million people from Ukraine died during the war. At the time, Ukraine's population was around 41 million. That means roughly 1 in every 4 Ukrainians was killed. To understand the scale, compare this with 2 of the best-known wartime tragedies. Approximately 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust.
Ukraine alone lost 8 to 10 million people. In other words, the total number of people who died in Ukraine was greater than the total number of Jewish victims in Europe. Of those 6 million Jews, around 1.5 million lived in Ukraine. At Babi Yar massacre in Kyiv, more than 33,000 Jews were shot in just 2 days. This tragedy is rightly remembered across the world. But even after including those 1.5 million Jewish victims within Ukraine's wartime losses, between 6.5 and 8.5 million other Ukrainians soldiers and civilians also died. That means Ukraine's non-Jewish losses alone were roughly equal to or greater than the total number of Jewish victims murdered in Europe. Now compare Ukraine with Russia. The Russian Soviet Republic lost an estimated 13 to 14 million people, but Russia's population was more than 110 million. That means roughly 1 in every 8 Russians died. In Ukraine, it was 1 in every 4. Proportionally, Ukraine lost twice as many people as Russia. And unlike Russia, much of the war was fought directly on Ukrainian territory. Almost the entire country was occupied. Kyiv was under Nazi occupation for 778 days. Kharkiv changed hands 4 times. More than 700 cities and towns and nearly 28,000 villages were destroyed. Around 2.4 million Ukrainians were deported to Germany as forced labourers. Thousands were imprisoned in concentration camps. Nearly 7 million Ukrainians served in the Red Army. Many never returned. And yet this story remains far less known internationally. For decades, Ukraine's losses were absorbed into a broader Soviet narrative and later presented to the world largely as a Russian victory.
At the same time, modern Ukraine has moved away from Soviet-era forms of commemoration, replacing Victory Day parades with quieter remembrance ceremonies. This shift reflects an understandable desire to distance Ukrainian memory from Russian symbolism. But historical recognition should not be reduced in the process. The scale of Ukraine's sacrifice deserves to be acknowledged clearly and publicly. Because preserving the memory of those who died is not only a matter of national tradition, it is a matter of historical accuracy and respect for the millions of Ukrainians who helped make the defeat of Nazism possible.
Yeah, that's very interesting, wasn't it? Well, you shared what you did as a child on the 9th of May when Ukraine celebrated the Victory Day. Because I'm from Kyiv, obviously we had all of those celebrations, but at a higher scale, of course. So in
like
the
a big
Central
parade.
Park, yeah, so well, in Hrishatik Street there would be a big parade. We often went there. And obviously we had meal with grandmother. And for me, you know, large red carnations, they always symbolized the Victory Day, and 23rd of February, the Red Army Day, which obviously turned into the Defender Day. But it was my grandmother's day as well, because she was in Soviet army during the war. So I really don't like large red carnations because they always symbolize me, you know, death and sadness and sort of bring all of that. So for me, they were only appropriate for cemeteries, putting on the graves, and for my grandmother, because that's the color of blood, the color of somehow sadness. I mean, it's bright, but for me, it's the color of sadness as well. So yeah, we had all the same, and of course there are lots of graves, symbolic memorials to unknown soldier, group graves, and of course the flowers were laid and the eternal fire, all that. But we also, you know, you said it's not on that day when we shared stories about the war, because my grandmother and I, we were very close, and she was a young woman when the war started. She had to fake her paperwork to join the army because she was too young. And that was not an unknown fact. And quite a lot of women in this country, in the UK as well, in the beginning of the First World War and Second World War, faked their paperwork to be able to join the army, maybe as nurses, not always army, but as sort of army nurses and so on.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, there were a lot of women. So actually, I have no idea how old my grandmother was, because her paperwork was faked when she was quite young, and then we had no idea. I mean, I didn't even know when her birthday was, because she celebrated her Saint's Day, not her birthday.
Okay.
You know, so interesting tradition of older people going past into the, you know, beginning of the last century. But it was sad because she lost at the beginning of war. Well, she was attached to the military unit with military planes and so on. She was involved in servicing then, and she fell in love with a pilot. Unfortunately, he was killed quite sometime later, maybe a year into the war. So then, closer to the end of the war, again, you know, being a young woman, she managed to get over this trauma, fell in love with another soldier. He was also a pilot. The war was over, everyone was excited. he was flying in a plane over mountains after the war was over, and the plane crashed and he was killed. And she decided she would never have a family, so that was, here they say third time lucky, which was for my grandmother, because my grandfather was an absolutely different person. He was in Kiev, she moved to Kiev after the war. He was a builder, and they got married, and that's why I'm here. But, there is lots of sadness stories about lack of food, how, for example, each of them got some cigarettes and so on, and they gave cigarettes to boys, and boys gave them chocolates and sugar and whatever sweet stuff they received in their portions.
That reminds me, you know what? Probably you know this movie, «В бой идут одни старики».
Of course, yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's about Ukraine with Ukrainian actor, and that was one of the big shock for USSR, because it wasn't possible to talk about special of Ukraine or other countries in USSR. We are just one nation, no one special. But somehow the director and the actors made it happen, and I think we need to share a piece of it.
Yes, please do.
Released in 1973, Only Old Men Are Going to Battle is one of the most beloved films in the history of Ukrainian cinema. A more meaningful English title would be Only the Veterans Go into Battle. In wartime slang, the old men were not elderly pilots, but experienced airmen who took on the most dangerous missions first, giving the younger recruits, still little more than boys, a better chance of surviving. Directed by Leonid Baikov, a Ukrainian filmmaker born in the Donetsk region, the film tells the story of a fighter squadron during the Second World War.
What made it unique was its humanity. Instead of focusing on propaganda and military triumph, Baikov showed young men who sang, joked, fell in love, and faced death together. The squadron became known as the Singing Squadron, and the film is filled with music, including beloved Ukrainian songs such as Nich Yaka Misyachna. Although it was filmed at the Dovzhenko Film Studios, Soviet authorities refused to release a Ukrainian language version, yet its spirit remains unmistakably Ukrainian. For generations of viewers, this film has stood not just as a war drama, but as a tribute to friendship, sacrifice, and the idea that the most experienced go first, so that the young may live.
Так что вы все-таки видели? Как же вы не заметили? Мы же сегодня над моей Украиной дрались.
А как тут заметишь? Те же поля, дороги, села.
Нет, а воздух другой. А небо голубее, и земля зеленее. Ну, а я из Таврии, юг України. Степь ровная, как стол. Колись тут чумаки по сіль їздили, на чумацький шлях поглядаючи, Млечний путь по-русски. И песни такие же бесконечные, как степь. Ой, у лузі, лузі, червона.
Червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну розвеселимо.
A different day,
Yeah,
which has similar traditions and similar meaning.
and similar color of the memorial flower.
Well, actually, Ukraine took it from Britain.
No way!
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know
in
it.
the past, in Soviet Union, it was Georgievskaya lentechka, which is Georgian
Yeah.
ribbon, yellow
It
and
becomes-
black or
yeah.
dark brown. And then, obviously, at some particular stage of our independence, there was a need in a different symbol, and so symbol was taken from Britain. And the red poppy is obviously a symbol of the Remembrance Day. Do you know where Remembrance Day is, when it is marked?
it probably somewhere in autumn.
It is in autumn, and I struggle with dates, but I help myself to remember because it's 11th of 11th.
Oh, okay.
If you just remember 11/11, so 11th of November is the Remembrance Day, and of course it can fall on any day of the week. So there is Remembrance Sunday, which is closer Sunday to this day, when there will be maybe a little, it's not called a parade, but if there are any veterans in towns or maybe families of the veterans who already died, people will gather again, bring flowers to a grave of the unknown soldier, communal grave, which is usually in the center of the city.
Yeah.
Lay wreath, lay flowers. There will be a service in the church as well. But there are, as we've said, that one of the parallels is beautiful red poppy. So everyone wears red poppies, and there are veteran charities who sell them in exchange. I wouldn't call it sell, exchange for donations, and then this money goes to support either surviving veterans of all the wars, not just one war. But do you know why the 11th of November was specifically chosen as the Remembrance Day?
No.
Shall we listen to it?
Yes, let's do
The
it.
story.
Remembrance Day in Britain. Every year on the 11th of November, Britain marks Remembrance Day. The date marks the moment the First World War officially ended at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. At 11 a.m., the country observes 2 minutes of silence. The tradition began in 1919 when King George V asked the nation to pause and remember those who had died in war. The most recognisable symbol is the red poppy, inspired by the poem In Flanders Fields, which described poppies growing on the battlefields of Belgium. People wear poppies on their coats, make donations to the Royal British Legion, and attend memorial services. The national ceremony takes place at the Cenotaph in London, where members of the royal family, veterans, and political leaders lay wreaths. And in a very British tradition, even the busiest streets, railway stations, and supermarkets fall completely silent for 2 minutes.
So now we know that this day is significant because it was the end of the First World War.
Yeah.
And so now, of course, the Remembrance Day treasures memory not just of the soldiers and civilians who were killed in the First World War, it's the Second World War as well, but all the wars where British soldiers are involved. Now we're including the war in Ukraine because we know that some British soldiers are fighting in Ukraine and, again, being killed and injured as we speak. But I just wanted to mention other traditions. For example, the Minute of Silence.
Yes.
So that's the tradition we have for the 9th of May. Right.
Yeah.
So
Same.
here there are 2 minutes of silence at 11. I think it might be 11:11 as well, but I think no, it's probably most likely it's 11 o'clock in the morning on 11th. If you listen to the radio or on TV, a moment of silence would be announced, and it will be 2 minutes, if I remember it correctly. So the first minute for the First World War victims, and then the second for victims of other wars. So I think it's very important. And now in Ukraine, especially I know in Alexandria, but in other cities as well, every day in the morning at 9 o'clock, for people it's important to stop for 1 minute to remember of the soldiers who have been killed, went missing in action, and so on. So shall we see how it happens in Alexandria?
Yes.
Right. You can see that these women, many of them are wives and sisters and daughters of soldiers who went missing in action. They gather every morning and stop vehicles in Alexandria to make sure people spend this minute thinking about our soldiers. And I think it's important for all of us. Maybe we can't stop at 9 o'clock in the morning, but find this moment during the day to sit and think of those people who are fighting for us and who are dying for us. But let's just move to something more joyful. And I've got a quiz question for you. Okay. So, do you know what Thankful Village is in connection to the World War I? Guess. Come on.
No, I have no idea what it is, honestly.
Okay, so Thankful Villages are the villages that didn't lose any soldiers or civilians during the First World War.
Oh, really?
So
Wow.
soldiers went to
In
fight.
Ukraine, there is nothing
No,
like that.
no. In Britain, I don't think there is a single Thankful Village in Scotland or Wales. There are quite a few in Somerset in England because there were lots of factories that needed to operate during the war to produce weaponry and so on. So that's why not that many soldiers were called off from that part of England, and so the chances, obviously, of them
Yeah,
returning back
higher.
are higher. And for me, well, I'm basically in Bath. I'm surrounded by Thankful Villages, and it always touches my heart if I drive and I see at the entrance to the village a big sign saying Thankful Village. There are also double Thankful Villages, where in the first and the second
Wow.
war, every soldier came back.
I think this is amazing to have such a bright feeling, because in my memory it always been a difficult time. It's not celebration in a way what we used to have celebration like a Christmas Day, or it's full of sad emotions, I would say. And I remember that for example, my grandfather, he was a soldier, and he have a lot of medals, but because his character is such a introvert person, he never speaks, never, like for his life with his family. None of his relatives know what exactly he did in the war and why he have such a big and higher status medals. And I remember that I think it was something like 2014, maybe 2012. There is a possibility to find out information about your relatives during the Second World War if you know the date of the birth, the family relatives, and some more information. You can find out because the archives become open, and I think that probably was the day when the time when the Immortal Polk
Squad
starts working globally. And I remember when I was just, I even didn't have a feeling that I will find out something, but I just was shocked that I found out that he was a spy.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and during Second World War. So my grandfather Anatoly, he has his first medal for the special mission where he gets into the enemy's camp and took a sample of gas mask for the horse. First in the USSR.
Wow.
And then his career became more intense. And for the one of his mission at the middle of the war, with 15 soldiers, he destroyed the part of the army.
Wow.
Just 15 people. And on a record, it says like he by himself killed 6 Nazis, and took the, this kind of the bicycle with a place.
For a passenger.
Yeah, for the passenger. So, and he had only one gun. So he was a superhero, with a superpower, and I don't know, it's amazing when I read it. And then I called to my grandmother and said, did you know this? And she's like, no way, where you found this information?
Well, where did you find this information?
Yeah.
Because I would love to look into
I don't
the
know.
past of my family.
So the website called in
Okay,
motorsport.
obviously.
Yes, and I don't know, is it working now or not, because it was before the full-scale invasion, and I think it was 2012 when I found out it. And also from another part of my family, my grandmother, she was 4 years old with her family. They were sent to Germany as slaves, and they have
sort of prisoners of war.
they become slaves. The train stops at the places before the Germany was Litva, because it was a part of supporting the Nazism country, and each single town and villages have people who want to have a slave from USSR. And nobody once took this family because there was 2 little kids. One is my grandmother, 4 years old, and another one is 2.5 years old. And almost last stop before the labor camp, one of the landlord, he took my family to his place, and they worked there as slaves. They sleep on the table for 4 of them in a kitchen, and my grand aunt become his mistress, and she become pregnant, and she give birth from the enemy, and then because my grandmother remember it very well, she starts speaking German and Lithuanian. So they spent there 2 years, and when the USSR army came to set them free, she remembered that as just a miracle, and she have so many memories which is kind of stuck with me, because it feels like I saw it by my eyes. And I remember that when they have a train to go back to USSR, the day when they steps to the homeland, my grandmother was too tired, and she started sleep on just some rocks and stuff, and somebody started shooting the guns everywhere. Everybody started to cry and laugh at the same time. She was so afraid, terrified, and then her mom come to her and said, the day of freedom, this is the day when we are free. Yeah. And when she described it, I always cried. And there is a lot of story that their houses were bombed, and the husband of her older sister, which were the mistress of the enemy and become pregnant and have a baby, were soldier, and he was killed. They think he was killed, but actually he wasn't. He come back and saw that their house is destroyed, and he was pretty sure that they not survive. Yes, so he took another wife. They have a family, and suddenly they appear in a area. So it's like
so tragic,
and it's only a small part. Each and everyone in Ukraine have their own story, even if relatives like my grandfather didn't talk about it. It's still in our DNA, and from as long as I remember myself, I always feel pain thinking about the war. And maybe you will agree with me that our grandparents always said, no matter what, but it's only not war happening. Everything we can survive. And my dad always said, we will survive. It's not 41st. It means 1941st. When Nazis came to Ukraine. So it's like even now sometimes it's not the 31st, we will survive, and sometimes it's just like, oh my God, it's almost 41st. It's the same feeling, and it's, I don't know.
Well, I think that
guess which year will be a year of our victory, and we will say, no, it's not 24th or 22nd. It's not 22nd.
Yeah,
We need to change it to not 22nd.
Yeah, but you know, in this country, although it hasn't been occupied for many, many years, as you know, I teach languages, and some of my students are quite elderly, because when you retire in this country, and we definitely will talk about this in another podcast, people have more time, they have money, and they have an opportunity to take on old hobbies or new hobbies. So I have students who are 70 plus, 80 plus, and they are great. We are good family, basically. We are very close friends. We have been teaching them for almost 15 years. And they are among those people who remember the First World War. Many of them are from London. Some of them remember bombs falling into their homes and destroying their houses. Sorry, my mistake. Second World War, when we had bombardments in London. So Bath was badly damaged. There was a blaze of Bath. And there are also, I think we need to dedicate maybe another episode to specifically maybe Blades of Bath and talk about how it was restored, because it's interesting and it gives hopes to people, for example, in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, Sumy and other places which have been badly damaged, that there is a hope. And, you know, things which were completely destroyed can become even more beautiful, and the memory and all of that will remain and be treasured. Yeah, but I think that's why I have really close connection with people in this country who are 70, 80 years old, because they've seen it with their eyes, and I remember it, as you've said, through those stories that my grandmother told me, and we have the same feeling of, you know, that this life is so fragile. It can stop at any moment, because they remember it as children, and I remember it as a child because I'm very sensitive, and every word my grandmother said turned into a picture. As you've said, I could see it with my own eyes. Right, but I think we probably need to stop here, and we really hope that you find this episode informative, and please, when you watch it, stop and spend a moment, 1 minute, thinking about those soldiers who were killed in your family maybe, or in whichever war, or soldiers in Ukraine, or civilians who died during any wars that your family somehow touched.
Thank you for watching. If you like this podcast, please like, share, comment, and see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.